Okay, we're recording. This is the 18 July OASIS Plus update. Welcome. I'm going to run through some of these topics kind of quickly today because there's not been a lot of changes since the last time we talked, but there have been a lot of questions that have come up. So I just wanted to circle back around on some of those topics. So today we'll run through our usual administrative updates, talk through some of the opportunity updates, get into our weekly topic, and then have time for Q&A at the end. And I couldn't find a cool meme, so I just went with a picture of a cute kid. There was 100% sugar crash did happen after this photo was taken. So hopefully everybody's summer is proceeding a little bit less chaotically. So administrative updates, there has been some newish material that we posted to our OASIS Plus information hub. This includes the Amendment 1 documents that were released, that revised JP3 form. We've got an updated guide to go along with that. We've also uploaded our tagging guides. We had sent some of those out following some questions that we'd gotten and some resources that got posted to Symphony. But now that more of the functionality of the portal is open, we've refined those a little bit. So there's an updated JP3 guide, and then there's also an updated file tracker. So if you're not using something like this to kind of keep things straight and remember where you're documenting what kind of information, we recommend it, right? Because you're going to need to know, you're going to have to cite the source for everything that you're claiming. So what's the document that lists your period of performance that you're claiming, which is the one the piece of evidence that you're going with. Same thing with total contract value. Anything in blue, this is a template that you can download from our information hub, and it basically has this project chart for each project. And the idea is just that it organizes your information. But anything that's in blue is a drop-down file in Symphony. And I will just state for the record, if you have a project that is for a federal agency that is not listed, one of two things could be happening. One is that it's not a distinct office, right? It might be a couple levels down from the agency level that the Symphony references. Or it could be that it's just missing from the list. We actually have had the situation during this submission process where there was an agency that we were expecting to see that we didn't see. So I've pulled the ground source document that FPDS uses to assign the agency funding codes. I've sent that to Symphony and cited on there, which one we needed, and they were able to add it in about 48 hours. So the resolution, it was fairly quick for a portal like this. And their help desk, I will say, has been very responsive. Their goal is to get back with you within 4 business hours. So if you have questions that are kind of technical about the capability of the platform, Apex is a really good resource, or you can check in with us, and we may have encountered this before and might be able to help you with a workaround. So please do check out the information hub if you've not been on there lately. Okay, so in terms of the opportunity, we still don't have full functionality of this Symphony portal, specifically as it relates to being able to generate the JP3s within Symphony. This is something that has not been unlocked. And I am at the point now, because we're a month in, where I'm not, unless you have a kind of unique circumstance, or you think that having a really streamlined form is going to be more advantageous to you, I think you're okay to go ahead and send your JP3s out if you haven't already and get those signed and returned, because I'd rather have the credits in hand or start having the conversations if things aren't going to get validated and confirmed while we still have enough runway to adjust and fix. So if you've not sent out your JP3s, I don't recommend continuing to wait on Symphony, because we just don't know when that is going to be open. And at this point, because the JP3 and the revision to the JP3 have been on the streets for about a month, I think they're going to have to accept anything that gets signed at this point. So, we saw this with Polaris, where partway through the solicitation, they amended the JP3 forms, but they still accepted the previous version. So I don't necessarily anticipate any issues with that. It's more just about getting the credits in, making sure they're totaling up the right way, and making sure the customers are willing to sign for the claims that we're making. The other sections that are not open yet are the cost and pricing data. I expect this to be a separate module, and I will talk a little bit about the update here, but it's not open as of yet, so you're not missing something. It's just not there. And then if you've watched any of Apex's training videos, they talk a lot about a cover page, and this is another section that I don't see yet in Symphony that was open for Astro and was for Polaris as well. They ended up building a specific section where you could basically upload a title page that included your proprietary data markings saying, anything submitted in the submission portal is to be used for proposal evaluation only and should not be, disclosed outside the bounds of the evaluation process. Everything else on the timeline is pretty much past, right? The latest update that we heard from GSA is that the full pricing functionality and everything else in Symphony would be open at the 15th of July. That date has come and gone, so they've amended what they said to just say after the 17th of July. So if it happens anytime after that, they're not technically wrong. So we're keeping an eye on that, checking and refreshing Symphony multiple times a day, and we'll let you know when it looks like everything's up and running. And then right now, the proposal due date is still the 13th of September. So our calendar has not really shifted. June is done and gone. Like I said, we're already 30 days into this. So we got 2 months left, but it's going to go quickly. A little less than 2 months left, I guess, because today's the 18th. So again, if you've not sent out those JP3s and those JP6 forms, if you need them in lieu of CPARs, we do recommend going ahead and doing that, setting the due date about two weeks from today. That way you've got enough time to follow up and not so much time that the customer forgets about it. Q&A were due last week. If you poked around in Symphony at all, you'll see that you can't submit questions anymore. So we're kind of keeping an eye on that to see if maybe they open it back up post-amendment for just a quick Q&A period. But otherwise, you should be working on all of the other tangential volumes, especially once you get those forms out the door. That's really going to free you up to do things like review your professional employee compensation plan or your uncompensated overtime policy. And if you are using one of our coach and review packages, then you can absolutely send us those documents, and we encourage you to send us those documents just so that we can kind of give you a QC and compliance check and make sure you have addressed all of the requirements, but also not stated anything that is inadvertently contradictory within your policies or statements, and that they're complete. And these are all things that you can upload now in Symphony and start seeing get populated in your business factors. So this is one of those have to be looking in all directions at once categories, because if you've been in Symphony lately, you probably saw the update that they posted on a Saturday that did not appear in the community of interest and has not been announced on SAM, but they basically said the pricing submission application is not available for upload. They've run into some delays, and there's going to be a forthcoming revision to attachment JP8, the cost price template. What's a little confusing about this is that JP9 is the cost price template and JP8 is the direct labor rate ranges. So I don't know what they meant to say there. I don't know if they're actually going to change both things. I've heard there may be an escalation rate error in the spreadsheet. I don't know if they're going to add more details to the labor rate range. So this is just one of those okay, not sure what you meant to say, but a change is coming and we're kind of on standby. And we'll let you guys know once we know more there. But just as it relates to cost and price, this is something that we've been getting asked a lot. A lot of bidders are preparing their spreadsheets and they're not bidding the max rates. You certainly have the freedom to not bid the maximum ceiling, but just recognize that there's also not really a good reason not to bid the maximum rates that GSA has already basically declared are reasonable. We talked about on the last webinar, there's only certain situations where you're actually going to be held to those ceiling rates. Excuse me. But in those situations, the maximum rates are supposed to reflect the most expensive employee you could ever hire with the highest level of expertise in the most expensive area of the country, not taking into account OCONUS or clearances. So why you would not say, yes, we would like the ability to bid up to the maximum amount, I'm not really sure, especially because right now, and we'll see if they change anything, but right now there's no substantiation required. You have to talk a little bit about your methodology and how you arrived at the direct labor rates, but only if you exceed the direct labor rate ceiling. So there's really no write-up that you have to provide beyond how you do your indirect rates and percentages for your company. So that's the only thing you have to substantiate, not the direct labor rates. So bottom line, we recommend bidding the max just in case you're ever in a situation where that ceiling actually applies. I'm sorry, I've got the summer crud courtesy of the daycare, I'm sure. Okay, I did want to spend a little bit of time just talking about tagging because we've gotten a lot of questions about this, and understandably so, because there's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach to what your document is going to look like. There are some tags, and you'll see these within Symphony, where we have been told what nomenclature to use for the tag. So period of performance, for example, is supposed to be POP. Cost reimbursable is supposed to be, cost reimbursement is supposed to be CR. But there's a lot of discretion left up to the bidders in terms of how they're tagging, right? The highlighting with the comment bubble in Adobe, everything else. So this table is kind of our recommended approach to flagging the documentation. So for relevance, because you're going to have to establish the QP's relevance. And so I recommend just keeping these as close to the RFP section labels for the different credit areas as possible. Excuse me. When it comes to the categories where there's different types of credit, so like for integrated experience, you know how you can either take credit for LCATs or functional areas, distinct functional areas. If you've played it all around or played in Symphony at all, you know that those are drop downs within the proposal build side of things. So you will have to select if you're taking credit for integrated experience LCATs or integrated experience functional area. But really, the tagging is supposed to help the evaluators zero in on the passage that you're using to substantiate the claim. So this is why the tag doesn't need to be especially complex, right? It's just supposed to help serve as a bookmark for the area that evaluators are taking a look at once they evaluate your proposal or once they're reading through your documentation. So yeah, you'll want to highlight what you're claiming in the different documents. And one of the things that we're going to recommend, if you're working with a Trident analyst, when you go to upload your documents, before you hit submit for the final proposal, we're going to do a screen share and we're going to review and we're going to pull all of the documents that you've uploaded to Symphony and take a look and scroll through them and say, okay, you've taken credit for integrated experience. Do we see 3 different functional areas tagged for integrated experience? And this is just going to be a quick way to help navigate through that. You'll notice, I know we talked about this a little bit last time, but in Symphony, under the proposal section, so where it has those credits for QP, for domain relevance, for integrated experience, et cetera, it just says location, and then there's a text box. So you can put in just the tag, that will suffice. They clarified that in the FAQs. Or you can list your tag and the document location, so whether that's the page number or the paragraph number, whatever, if you want to add amplifying information. But technically, the tag alone will suffice. So again, we want to keep these kind of short and tidy, and I have some generic rules around tagging that we can talk through next. So as you're tagging and prepping your documents, just keep in mind the whole idea still of tagging is that you're just pointing out evidence. You're not adding amplifying narrative or clarifying text unless it's something very concise, because you want your documents to stand on their own. So keeping these tags short and concise, you don't need a whole paragraph within the tag. And in fact, sorry guys. The only section where you're really permitted to provide a narrative is as it relates to the domain relevance. So if you're trying to say, look, this project aligns to T&E, because even though it doesn't have the automatic NICS code, it clearly has tasks that fall under the T&E domain as evidenced by blah, blah, blah. And then you have your explanation. They haven't asked for that for integrated experience. They haven't asked for you to tally up the LCATs. They've just asked you to flag where in the document it's substantiated. So that's what you need to do. I wouldn't give them more or less than what they're asking for. And one of the reasons that or we as your Trident resource can help you figure out what right looks like as it relates to what the appropriate amount of tagging is. So please do use us to review your SAOs and your award documents and your JP3s before you get things uploaded so that we can give you that sanity check and say, yes, this makes sense, it's clear, or hey, I would recommend adjusting this tag, or you've got place of performance tagged in 3 different places and that's not even a credit area, so let's pull it out. Let's keep these documents clean. So what you see on the right is just a sample of what your tags are going to look like in Adobe, right? Like my personal preference is to use your tag and keep it all caps. And I bold it, right? Because, in all my extra time in dealing with Symphony things, I've just found that to be a best practice, so that if you do have to add any amplifying text, you know where the tag ends and where your text begins. But like for functional areas, right? If we want to get credit for having 3 or more functional areas, I might label all of those tags. I might say this is functional area 2 of 3, functional area 3 of 3, 1 of 3, whatever it happens to be. And they may or may not go in order, just depending on how your document is structured. So personally, I think the functional area 1 of 3 should be whatever you're claiming relevance to in the domain, but that's not a hard and fast rule. It doesn't really matter. That's just for my own internal organization. I would say for the functional area tags, and this is a nit, this is not a requirement, but I think if you're tagging an area, a functional area, I think you want to say it aligns to the M&A functional area, not the M&A domain, because domains relate to relevance, functional areas relate to integrated experience. And the reason that matters is because there's more functional areas available for claiming credit than what the open domains are right now. So there's those eight domains, if you're counting the enterprise services domain and the unrestricted track, but otherwise we're talking T&E, M&A, R&D, Intel services, facilities, environmental, et cetera, right? Those are the ones that are also domains. So those count as functional areas. The two terms are basically interchangeable if you're trying to determine service areas, but as it relates to integrated experience credit, I would call it a functional area and not a domain, just because technically there's functional areas that haven't become domains yet. And then, don't over tag in your document. You don't need, if you're trying to substantiate that you provided more than 5 labor categories, you don't need to tag every section of the document where you have more than five labor categories. You just need to tag it once. Excuse me. Okay. And then things that we're just watching because they may cause a little bit of churn once we get answers. So if you took a look at the financial responsibility section, we talked about this on one of the previous webinars. There's no more GSA form 527 like we saw in the draft RFP. Now they've asked for the previous 3 years of financial statements, but they haven't clarified what that means. So if this proposal goes in September or October or November or December, does that mean they want to see financial reports from 2021, 2022, and however far through 2023 we've gotten? Or are they looking for the last 3 complete years, in which case none of 2023 applies? Do they want 3 full years plus an interim year? We just don't know yet. The other section that's a little bit clumsy, and I'm not trying to drag Apex, I promise, but if you've worked with Symphony, one of the sections that's a little bit clumsy is you have to substantiate when you go to build your proposal. If you're submitting things in the M&A domain and you select a project and you want to use it as a relevant QP, you have to select, there's like relevance and QP are 2 separate categories. So you have to indicate that this project is going to be a QP. And then you have to flag something in a file. But I don't know if they're looking for us to flag and tag all 5 qualifying criteria that make it a QP, or if they just want to see the FPDS record, but obviously that won't help if you have a subcontract. So there's just some missing guidance, I think, around how to substantiate your QP claim, different from the relevant QP claim. The collection of task orders. So this one is like we have some of this information, right? They do want to see CPARs for every single task order, but how they want to see all of the documentation uploaded for this is still a little bit wonky to me. Because we know we can either consolidate documents into one PDF and then just have the tagging within that. But how are they going to determine like where one task order starts and where the next one begins? Like it just gets a little bit wonky. And so I'm hoping they give us a little bit more clarification around what they're looking for in terms of the tagging structure there, because that could get really unwieldy if you're using multiple task orders as a collection of task orders for your proposal. And then same thing with the period of performance calculations. There's a little bit of a disconnect when it comes to calculating. So the annual contract value part makes sense to me because you're using the start date of the earliest task order and the end date of the latest task order. But then they have that paragraph in there about the base period IDIQ having application. And it's unclear if that's for the generic relevance, recency of the project, or if how that's getting counted. FTE calculations for projects that are less than 12 months. We know that for average annual contract values, we can't annualize the value. But if you have a 6-month project, how are they going to determine if you had FTEs on that? Because they've stated an FTE is 19, 20 hours. So does that mean that you just need to have whatever portion of the year the 1920 would work out to? Like, are we able to divide that out and just, scale it basically based on the duration? I'm not sure how they're going to calculate that. I mentioned this already, but in Symphony, you can't submit any more questions. So gosh, I hope you don't have any. But following an amendment, there's always questions that industry has or things that they want to get clarification on. So are they going to open up that Q&A ability, even if it's just for a week following the amendment? I would kind of hope so. And then is there going to be an extension based on the slow rollout of Symphony? They're not super behind schedule, right? They thought mid-July was when they were going to have things kind of up and running. But we still don't have answers to questions. They extended the Q&A period. They've slowed down the rollout. I don't know. We might see this pushed. I know everybody's kind of under the gun to get it competed, get the awards turned in, but I know they also want to do it right. So kind of TBD. But I'm sure somebody's going to ask for an extension in the Q&A, because it always happens. Okay. Those are the topics that I wanted to cover today. So at this point, I will go on mute, probably cough a little bit more, but open up the floor and stop recording in case you guys have any questions that you want to talk through while we're here.